Omens. Desperate men do desperate things, and so it is in war. The Trojans, determined to reach the ships on the other side of the ditch, pushed forward, but were held at bay by two huge men. Behind them the Greeks desperately reorganized. The ditch was too wide for chariots to cross. Horses refused to move when they reached the edge. The Greeks had pounded and sharpened stakes to make the crossing even more difficult. From behind the palisade, the Greeks continued an unending shower of arrows and stones. Archers shot two from the Trojan side, and the palisade was filled with arrows like a porcupine with its quills clattering in defiance. Both sides rained flurries of stones on their enemies. Their clatter and thundering on helmets and shields were deafening. The Greeks had to hold. To retreat now would be to allow the Trojans to reach the beach and head onto their ships. The Trojans raised their shields, charged, and were pushed back over and over. Hector and Polydamas formed a raiding party of the bravest Trojans. As they were about to leap down into the ditch, they heard a cry from the men behind them. Flying along their lines high up in the sky, an eagle struggled to hold on to something in its cruel claws. As it flew closer, the men saw the eagle was holding a huge blood-red snake. The eagle's wings rose for balance as it struck down at the writhing beast. And as the eagle struck, so did the snake. The serpent sunk its fangs into the eagle's neck. In agony, the huge bird released the snake. It dropped among the Trojans as the eagle, screaming in pain, flew on an eddy of the wing. Zeus is sending us a warning. Zeus is turning against us. The Thundermaker on the Greek side, the men whispered fearfully as the snake writhed on the ground. I'm not interested in birds and snakes and so-called omens. Zeus, the Thunderer, has promised victory, and he is with us, Hector said, ordering the company back into battle. At first, it did seem that Zeus was on Hector's side. He raised a wind that blew sand and dust into the faces of the Greeks as they tried to push back the charging Trojans. Yet still the Greeks' defenses hold. It was Saprodan who showed where to make the fatal breach for the Trojans by racing across the ditch and scaling the mounds of boulders that formed the base of the wall. He was followed by men determining to force back the Greek defenders. The noise was as loud as a winter avalanche in the mountain of Crete. The defenders called on Ajax for support. He and Teucer, the archer, began to pick off warriors who had followed Hector across the ditch to the base of the wall. Teucer took out the men with his arrows, and Ajax smashed men's skulls and hip bones with huge boulders thrown from the top of the wall. Yet slowly and surely the Trojans began to gain a foothold. Along the battlements of the stones were soaked with Trojan and Greek bloods. It was Zeus who tipped the balance for the Trojans, and Hector yelled on his foot soldiers to tear down the Greek gates. Hector leaned down to pick up a boulder no man could lift. Zeus gave him strength. He lifted and threw. The gates ripped away from their hinges, shattered by the force of the boulder. The breach filled with chaos and the men and weapons. Hector, gripping two spears, raced for the gap with a look like nightfall. He and his men brought panic to the Greeks. They fled between their curving ships. Hell ran loose on the beaches.